Good morning, good morning. Next up, we have Morgan Frank from Sanuwave.
Wow, I just got called Buttercup. That hasn't happened to me in a while. Hi guys, thanks for coming. Welcome to the Sanuwave presentation. I'm Morgan Frank, CEO. This is a chance to speed read our always scintillating forward-looking statements. Anybody who buys stock in public companies gets whatever's coming to them, etc. Okay, so here's the story in a nutshell. I became CEO of Sanuwave 22 months ago now, and have been running a fairly aggressive turnaround. It's been sort of a play in 3 acts. 2023 was, let's dig this thing out of the mud. 2024 was, let's take it apart, put it back together again. And 2025 is, let's take it out on the highway and see what it'll do. So, here we are. We're a commercial stage medical device company in the wound care space. Our lead product, UltraMist, is a non-contact, non-thermal, deep ultrasound product that uses directed energy in forms of complex wound healing. This is a $45 billion market in the US. We are a commercial stage company. Our product is FDA cleared, and we have Schedule I nationwide CMS reimbursement. There are a bunch of sort of mega trends that are working in our favor here. The 2 that really seem to matter are there's a major transition going on in healthcare toward evidence-based medicine. The payers have become very, very sensitive to, does it work and is this a cost-effective solution? The other being that there is a move toward what CMS is calling care to the edge. And this is basically, we want to treat you where you are rather than aggregating you in hospitals. Our product is protected by over 100 patents. We have foundational patents in the space. We have use patents in the space. We have patents going back years. We have some that were issued just in the last couple of years, and we continue to keep the sort of patent picket up. We're a classic sort of razor blade business. Our gross margins are in the high 70s. 55 to 65% of our revenue comes from a recurring consumable stream. We grew 60% year on year last year, put up $32.6 million of revenue, and I think perhaps most important, turned the company profitable on an operating and on an adjusted EBITDA basis. In this case, adjusted EBITDA just being cash EBITDA once you take out all of the non-cash changes in option value, warrants, etc. We've given guidance for this year of 48 to 50 million of revenue, which is 50% growth at the midpoint, plus or minus 3. So this is a wound care market. It's sort of like the biggest little market you never heard of. 45 billion a year in the US. Frankly, I think this number's a little dated. It's probably closer to 55, maybe even 60 billion now. Diabetic foot ulcers alone are a larger indication than breast cancer. It's an absolutely enormous market. The number of places where treatment is possible are huge. You have almost 30,000 assisted living facilities, 15,000 skilled nursing facilities, 10,000 physician offices, over 2,000 wound care centers. You've got hospitals. And increasingly, wound care is being handled using mobile care, where you have they will actually bring the care to you, whether you're in a nursing home, a long-term care facility, or in your own home. So this really accentuates the sort of care to the edge philosophy. This is it. That's the thing. It's a small device, weighs 7 pounds, uses a horn to generate low-frequency ultrasound. This is very distinct from the sort of ultrasound you'd use for imaging, like 40 kilohertz rather than sort of 2 orders of magnitude higher. Device never touches the wound. Treatment is pain-free. Speeds healing, reduces pain, kills bacteria, reduces biofilm, promotes blood flow, promotes revascularization of the wound and wound bed. It's a great procedure. It takes about 6 minutes. Can be performed by a doctor, a nurse, a physical therapist, really any trained medical professional, and highly portable device, weighs only 7 pounds, indicated for most major wound types. Easily transportable in the charming Pelican case that we'd be happy to sell anybody who wants to buy one. This is sort of the happy circle, right, of evidence-based medicine, right? Usage drives improved outcomes, drives clinical evidence, drives improved reimbursement, drives increased usage, right? That's sort of the virtuous cycle. And ultimately, anytime you're selling a medical device, you have three core constituents, right? You have the patient, you have the physician, and you have the payer. Obviously, the needs of the patient are sort of paramount, but if either of those other two are sort of pulling against you, it becomes very difficult to scale in a market. And if you can align all three together, that's when you really have something. So, first off, the patients. Like, what does the patient want? The patient wants to get better. The patient wants their life back, right? By the time you are being treated in the UltraMist system, you have a complex non-healing wound. You are not living your best life. Like, complex non-healing wounds are awful. I hope nobody's eating because wound care is a little bit yucky. This is a 77-year-old male. Sorry, that's a typo. Should be 77. It's also my uncle. This happened earlier this year. Collapsed from systemic staph infection, wound up in the ICU, under anesthesia, intubated. That wound on the back of his right hand came from a surgery to remove necrotic tissue, right? So you're left with that wound. He's in a top hospital in Florida. That wound is being treated. This is a full Wagner stage 4. You're looking at the tendons in the back of his hand. That wound was being treated by taking a ball of gauze, soaking it in antiseptic, putting it in that hole, covering it with a dressing, and wrapping it in ACE, right? That's, when people ask, like, what is your primary competition? It's that. Like, I've literally been trying to get permission from my marketing team to launch an ad campaign whose tagline is the 1950s called, they want their wound care back. I'm getting some pushback that might be a little insulting to our customers, but I think we're gonna try and find a happy medium here. But bottom line, the plastic surgeon who had control of this wound said, yeah, we're gonna leave it for 3 or 4 months. At that point, the swelling will have gone down enough that I can do surgery, close the wound. He'll probably get most of the use of his hand back. And, ta-da. And as you can imagine, I took a fairly dim view of that and said, wrong. And so we actually took him home, put him in his own house, had a mobile wound care provider treat him with UltraMist. You can see that you're already getting granulated tissue after 5 treatments. You're getting re-epithelialization after 13, 18 treatments, 6 weeks later. Wound is closed, no bandage, no pain, no surgery. Right? This is one of the key things I think people underestimate about the appeal of UltraMist to a patient is that it doesn't hurt. Right? You can actually manage debridement without contact. Normally, the way you would get the necrotic tissue off a wound like that is you'd take a sharp and you'd scrape the edges of it until you get all the dead tissue off. And like I can see by the faces I'm getting in the audience right now, you're imagining what that feels like. And it's, this is not how you want to spend your day, right? And so if you could get a treatment that doesn't hurt, makes you feel better immediately afterwards, this is very appealing to patients. And it's sort of astonishing the amount of white space that is available in this space. So, what about the other constituents here, right? Here's physician economics. So UltraMist has Schedule I reimbursement under CPT code 97610. We are, to my knowledge, the only product that has clinical evidence for wound healing in a non-contact ultrasound medium. And so anybody else who's trying to use this code is doing it without any clinical evidence. It's very limited code. Reimbursement is $400 to $700 per procedure. Average is $420. The $700 is sort of an outlier. That's California. The procedure takes 6 minutes. The physician buys a $100 at list price applicator from us, and off you go. Like we have some of the mobile guys who are really, really high throughput. You will see 10, even 15 patients a day with a physician because they're stopping by nursing homes and sort of treating everyone. In their case, payback on this device becomes a matter of weeks, like literally weeks, not months. So what about the payer, right? The payer wants to save money. Like the payer is all about, does this work? Does it close wounds more quickly? Is doing this less expensive than other things we can do? This study was performed in the intensive care unit at Mayo Clinic. It was essentially, like they looked at patients that had deep tissue injuries. This is a very common injury in an ICU. You're laying on your hip, you get that kind of big, nasty, purple, squishy bruise. Your skin denatures, and that can go from bad to, oh my God, that's bad, in sort of nothing flat. Two-arm study, standard of care at Mayo, 70% of patients progressed beyond a Wagner stage 4. Wagner stage 4 is full thickness. You're talking about like my uncle. 80% of patients treated with Ultramist resolved at a stage 2 or less. Stage 2 is partial thickness bed sore, right? So 80% bed sore versus 70% bone deep. This is how we became standard of care in the Mayo ICU. It's all about, can you reduce the amount of time someone's going to be in a hospital? It's all about, can you get the wound treated early? Like, wounds are sort of an exponential disaster curve where treating a wound early is cheap and easy. Treating a wound late is hard and expensive. And so a really big part of this fight is, can you get somebody with a wound over the hurdle to go get the treatment early? And I think that's why it really helps to have a procedure that patients actually like. So what's in it for us? And this is sort of our unit economics. We'll sell you a system for $35,000. We'll sell you single-use applicators for $100. Each of those is useful for one procedure. Those are list prices. We do a little bit of discounting on that, though, a lot less than we used to. And we've got margins in the high 70s with room to increase them. If you look here, you can sort of see the device. Like, that's the actual wand of the Ultramist system. The piece on the left is the disposable applicator that you snap on every time you're going to do a procedure. So I know this has sort of become a hot question for everybody. We do all of our manufacturing domestically. We, at this point, see no risk from the tariff complexities that have become so popular on Wall Street lately. Perhaps some of you have heard something about it. We have last year we stood up 2 new manufacturers for the Ultramist device. They're both domestic, one in Salt Lake, one in Minneapolis. We have a third provider who makes the applicators, also in Minneapolis. We are standing up a second source for the applicators, also domestic. We started cutting steel on our shiny new 4-cavity applicator mold back in January. We're doing a minor redesign on it as we stand up the new line. That will take a couple of sort of odious epoxy cure, like UV cure epoxy steps out of the manufacturing, replace them with a barb fitting and a sonic weld. It'll make the product lower defect, easier to manufacture, and probably push the gross margins on the applicators up north of 80. So the company had a legacy product. Dermapace was also called Profile when you sold it into the orthopedic space. Those were Shockwave products. We have not manufactured them since 2023. So we've been sort of slowly converging on, there's still some refurbishment business on them, but we've been slowly converging on, this is entirely an Ultramist company. We've now reached the point where it's about 99%. We had 1,047 systems in the field at the end of Q4. We sold 135 systems in Q4, 374 for the year, and that means that 36% of all Ultramist systems currently in the field were sold in the last 12 months. That puts us at something still a little bit south of 1% market penetration. So you can see there's sort of a nice linear path on applicators. You see the typical med device seasonality in systems themselves. I think there is some seasonality in applicators as well. I think it was a little bit masked last year just because we were both growing so fast and because we pushed through a price increase in Q1. But in general, these are the sorts of growth rates on the underlying product that we have been experiencing. This is just sort of the greatest hits of the last year. Right? We grew 60% to 32.6 million. We hit 7.2 million of cash EBITDA. Q4 was 10.3 million of revenue, 3.7 million of cash EBITDA. So basically a 35% cash EBITDA margin at kind of that $10 million quarterly rate. We gave guidance for Q1 of 8.4 to 9 million. We pre-announced earlier in April that we were a bit above that range. We're going to come in at 9.1 to 9.3, so up kind of 57 to 62 year on year. And again, we've guided to sort of 48 to 50 for the year as a whole. Let's see. So, this is just the sort of tell them what you told them slide. we're in front of, we're in a huge market that's in front of some really big meta trends, right? I mean, people aren't getting younger. Wounds are real. There's a lot more assisted living going on. I think we found alignment between the patients, the payers, and the providers. It's a great business model. It's a razor blade model. The margins are high. They have room to increase. It's a very capital light model where we don't do our manufacturing. Like there's just not a lot of additional cost to continue to ramp this. I mean, once you have a finance department, you have a finance department, and we already bit the bullet years ago and put the whole company on NetSuite, like Oracle's top of the line NetSuite ERP. Like we don't have any of these sort of scary projects left. And so, I mean, it gets us to a point where I think once we get the new applicators out in the market, kind of Q4 of this year, where we could be in a position to have something along the lines of 50% contribution margins, where every incremental dollar revenue is going to drop 50 cents to the operating line, and we're going to use it to pay down debt. Like we'd like to get debt free as quickly as we can, and I think we can do that out of cash flow, and over the next 18 to 24 months. At which point, we just become a company with great margins, 8.5 million shares outstanding, and a $208 million NOL. So, if we start paying taxes, get excited, because that means some really good things have happened. That's it. I mean, we're just, this is really sort of a keep it simple, stupid model. Like we're just trying to be, I think in the 90s, there was sort of this investment thesis called GARP, right? Growth at reasonable prices. You're a company, you grow, you make money, pick a multiple that you'd pay for a business like that. And we're just trying to make this very, very simple. That's what I got. I mean, so the question is, are we worried about protecting the product through patent runoff? And I mean, the answer is, yeah, we always worry about that. We got another couple of patents issued just in the last 2 years. And so, the goal is to keep running through and patenting more things. Like we're also, this company had really been up until 5 minutes ago when we, did this sort of capital restructuring last year, a very hand-to-mouth sort of company where it's sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? When you are worried about where your next breath of air is coming from, nobody cares about what's for dinner. And so we now have the luxury of caring about, what comes next. We're starting to look at what would Ultimus 2.0 look like? How can we take this game someplace more complicated where the rest of the market can't follow? So, I mean, there's nothing that really overtly worries me to sort of at the moment to sort of answer your question, but it is something that we worry about, and it's something that we want to try and stay in front of. Okay, see, so if you're looking at the picture, sorry, how's the point work? So this is the actual wand of the device. This is the consumable. It's essentially, it's the spray nozzle, it's the tubing for the spray nozzle, it's the sterilized housing. It's important to have that front piece be sterile in case there's inadvertent wound contact. And because you're atomizing water in front of it, and so you wouldn't want to use something non-sterile and potentially contaminate the water. Sure. Let's see. We started 2024 with 2 full-time salespeople. We ended 2024 with 9. We, at the beginning of this year, hired a new head of sales. And so his name is Tim Warren. He was the protege of one of our board members, Jeff Blizzard. Jeff was the head of sales for Abiomed. Tim was his number 2. So they're the 2 guys that took Abiomed from kind of 0 to 400 million and sold it to J&J. And so they're kind of excited to get the band back together, and so are we. And we ended Q1 also with 9 salespeople, but 3 of them were different than the ones we started with. And we've been sort of focusing on upgrading to a higher end, more senior salesperson, more capable of a consultative sale. We're starting to try to engage with a much bigger customer. Like we used to kind of have this like, wow, they could buy 4, and now it's like, wow, that guy could buy 400. And, that's a very different interaction. And so it takes a different, in med device, they talk about selling into the carpeted part of the facility rather than the tiled part. And this is sort of that. And, a lot of these customers wouldn't have given us, the time of day 5 minutes ago, right? Because if you're going to make that kind of capital commitment, you tend to ask some pointy questions about like, hey, are you going to be here next year to sell me applicators? And, I think that's one of the reasons we were really anxious to get this to a cash generative standpoint so that we could, pass the sort of red face test in front of a customer like that. But so going forward, like, yeah, I mean, we're really just starting to pick the low-hanging fruit. Like, we're really getting our sales force put together. We're just starting to do some of our first really serious concerted marketing efforts. A lot of it was waiting to make sure we had the manufacturing absolutely nailed before we started doing that. Because, I mean, the last thing you want to do is go generate a ton of, the two wheels have to spin at the same speed. If you generate a ton of demand and then can't fill it, you look like a jerk. If you build lots and lots of stuff and can't sell it, you go broke. And so we've been trying to keep those two things within sort of a reasonable distance of one another. Longer than I would like. Some of these things have been in the field for a decade. As long as you don't abuse them, they last a really long time. It's one of the reasons why we're starting to explore some of what could we do with the next one that would be compelling enough that people would want to buy a new one. So the question is the treatment the same for different wound types? I mean, it's the same in the sense of, yes, you're providing the same ultrasonic treatment. The length of the procedure may vary. Like it can go from sort of 3 minutes to 20 minutes. But in terms of like, what are you actually doing? Like, yes, it's identical. You're eliciting the body's own sort of deep regenerative instincts or pathways. It's a process called mechanicotransduction. You're also sort of lysing bacteria, killing biofilms. Like it's really the same all around. We're doing a lot of selling into mobile wound care, into long-term care facilities, nursing homes, SNFs, podiatry offices, wound care centers. I'm trying to think of where else. I mean, that's really sort of the core market. Sorry, can you? It does have, it's often used in conjunction with other things to treat things like that. We have customers that sort of do naughty things and use it off-label with things other than saline that have sort of the same specific gravity and density, but are also antiseptics. I mean, in general, by the time you've got actual sepsis, you're doing a lot of intravenous antibiotics and other you tend to be on a suite of treatments there. But it is helpful in that it will take off the dead tissue, and you actually get a lysing effect of the bacteria. Like you get the saline into the wound, the ultrasound creates cavitation bubbles that actually explode and kill bacteria. And so you're probably getting a 2 to 3 log reduction in bacteria, but I don't know that I actually have any data on sepsis specifically, and so I hesitate to get too definitive on that answer. It's a great question. When you have 8.5 million shares, saying things like stock buybacks tend to make everybody like look at you side-eye monkey. Maybe the question is what capabilities can we add? Are there some very simple technological tuck-in acquisitions that make sense? Maybe it literally is something as pedestrian as buying back stock or paying dividends. I mean, like it's really not a very capital-intense model. And so it would come down to, are we planning to build something new and really exciting that we think is a really good use of money? Or, like we're not Like, we're not gonna sort of hoard it and splash around in it like Scrooge McDuck's ball. Okay, we got 1 more minute. Any buzzer beater questions? Thank you, guys.